Good morning. Today is the 19th day of Second Adar, the 29th of March. And we're up to the, almost final reading, the sixth reading of Parshat Tzav. And we're going to be focusing on Leviticus chapter 8, verses 22 and 23. And we're at the very end of the process of ordination for the priests. And it says in verse 22 that he brought forth the second ram, the ram of ordination. Oh, if you recall, who is he who's doing this? So this is Moses. He's doing this, and he was doing basically everything, ordaining the priests. Let me just come up to it. Sort of lost my book here. Too many books on the table. Just 1 second. Let me read you the whole paragraph, so we can get a little bit up to speed here. So in 22, he brought forth the second ram, the installation ram, or the ram of ordination, and Aaron and his sons leaned their hands forcefully upon the ram's head. So we have here again this thing called smicha. There's an interesting thing about laying the hands on the head of the animal that's being sacrificed. What do you do when there are more than one person bringing it together? So in this case, the same animal was being used for Aaron and his 4 sons together at the same time. So if it's at the same time, then do they all put their hands on it together, or do they do it one after another? So interestingly, Rashi doesn't get into it. He doesn't say how you do this. But in a Tosefta is Mishnah that was not put into the Mishnah itself. These are teachings that they remembered by heart, but for whatever reason didn't make it into the Mishnah. So there it says that the first one, you sort of learn it from this verse, that Aaron did it first, and then his sons one after another in succession, they each put it on the animal. And this is where you learn this from, that each one has to do it separately, you don't do it together. But in any case, the reason we're focusing on this is because of the next verse. And the next verse says, he slaughtered it. Again, it doesn't say who's doing all this. He brought forth the second ram, he slaughtered it. But this is all Moses doing. And on the word he slaughtered it, if you have a Torah with Hebrew, and hopefully it has cantillation marks. So in the cantillation marks, you'll see that there is a very rare, almost the rarest cantillation mark called the shalshelet, an veishchat, on this word, and he slaughtered it. And basically the way you would read it is veishchat, and it's really long and drawn out, as you just heard. And what's the reason for this? What's going on? Why is this long and drawn out? So there's another one that's like this. We actually saw it, and I believe that we talked about it in Vayera, in Genesis, and there was with Lot, that Lot had to be evacuated from Sodom. And the angel wanted to take him out. But he took his good old long time until he finally was ready to go. And so there's a word there, Vaitmahama, and he tarried. And he tarried, and he tarried, and he tarried. And it also has the same cantillation mark. So the Torah is telling you, he took his own sweet time. Like he's in no hurry. You could say that it was something good, you could say it was something bad. You could say it was something good in the sense that maybe he wanted, maybe there was a chance for some tshuva, maybe there was a chance for some repentance on the people on the side of the people of Sodom. But usually the understanding is that he simply didn't believe that anything was going to happen. It was very strange, like out of nowhere, suddenly fire and brimstone are going to fall down on the city. Why would that happen? And so he really didn't believe it. But in either case, the fact that this first appears on this word, Vayitma'ama, he tarried, it teaches us that, and again, the way that this is sung, it tells us that this has something to do with elongating, with taking a long time about something. So when I was younger, the explanation I heard about why is there a shelshel atira on this word in he slaughtered was because this was the last time that Moses would slaughter anything as the high priest. If you remember, during the 7 days of ordination, when he's ordaining Aaron, his brother, to be the high priest, so somebody had to be in that role already, and that was Moses. And he was serving as a high priest, but without the clothing, because the moment that you don the clothing, as we spoke, the moment that you don the clothing, then you're the high priest already. You can't give it up. So he was wearing a simple white cloak, and he was performing the duties of the high priest, plus the duties that God had given him in order to ordain his brother as high priest. So since this was the last time he would slaughter, he put a lot of thought into it. Of course, he had to put only thought into it, because you can't slaughter in a long time. You can't tarry in slaughter. It has to happen immediately. It's one swift action. You can't stop in the middle. If you stop in the middle, the animal is unkosher. So it had to be done in one swift motion, but it's like saying that there was a lot of thought going into it, a lot of intent, that this is the last time that I'm going to be doing this. That was what I was taught a long time ago, but let's see how Rav Ginsburg explains this. So he explains it by looking at like we said, the previous verse. What kind of sacrifice is this ram? So Rashi writes, the ram of ordination is synonymous with the word peace. It's a very interesting thing for him to read. To say, because miluim is ordination. And here he says that really this is, even though it's a ram of ordination, it's a ram of a peace offering. It was done exactly like a peace offering. So there was no difference between it. It just happened to be that that's what they brought in order to ordain themselves. And then he asks, why would the ram of ordination be a ram that's a peace offering? And Rashi says this term is used to describe the ram because by means of it, the priest was made whole. Peace, as you know in Hebrew, also means whole. Shalom is peace, shalem is whole. So it made him whole. It made the priests consummately whole in their priesthood. This is, I'm quoting from Rashi now. So he has this idea that the reason that they're bringing this type of sacrifice, which is actually like a peace offering, is because they want to become whole and consummately whole. What does that mean? What does it mean to be consummately whole? To be consummately whole in Hasidic thought means that a person is 100% true to their authentic self. And what exactly is that? It means that there's no waste of energy, there's no waste of time. The person is dedicated 100% to what their mission on earth is. That's what it means to be consummately whole. And where is this really tested? It's tested in one's, let's call it one's sexual relations. That if they are pure and whole, and he's not, or she's not, in any kind of relationship that they shouldn't be in, so that demonstrates consummate wholeness. That the person is true to themselves, because the Torah tells us how these relationships need to be, what is proper and what isn't, and a person is true to this, he's also true, or she is also true to himself or herself. And that means not wasting one's energy, and especially the sexual energy, but making sure that it's used in the right place. that it's used only in order to procreate or to bring a husband and wife together. That's the real use of it. And that's why there's pleasure in it also, because that pleasure is what's meant to bring two people together. When pleasure is used the right way, when wine is used in order to have a seder or to have a kiddush and Shabbos, so that energy, which is in and of itself very powerful energy, is being used in the right way. So then the sages say, Gdola legima shemekarevet. Great is a toast because it brings people together. So I'm using it in the right way. That's what it means to be consummately whole. And when I'm talking about myself, not just my property or other things that I use, when I talk about myself, it means where am I expending my energy? Where am I putting it? What am I doing with it? There's a famous story of someone in Chabad, in Lubavitch, who was very blemished in this respect and wasn't able to concentrate, wasn't able to focus on his things. And he kept complaining to the Rebbe at the time, was the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe. He kept complaining that he had something like, I guess if he would have been alive today, would have said, I have ADHD. And I can't focus on anything. I can't finish my tasks. And the Rebbe sent him to some distant village to go and meet a particular disciple. And he arrived there towards the nighttime, and he looked for the house. He found the house, and he saw that there was light inside. So even though it was getting late, he decided to knock, and he hears that there's noise inside. There's furniture moving and so on, but nobody's coming to the door, and he keeps knocking, and he knocks and knocks. Eventually he gave up. After an hour or so, he just gave up, even though he heard there were people inside. He came back the next morning, and the guy welcomed him. He had heard that he was coming. He invited him in, and he stayed with him for a couple of days. At the end of 2 days, there's a number of things that happened in that encounter, but we're going to focus just on the first one, that he wasn't let in. At the end of 2 days, he said to the disciple that he had come to see and learn from, he says to him, you haven't taught me anything. He says, of course I've taught you things, you just didn't notice. The first thing I taught you when you first came is that you have to be a master of your own house. You have to be in charge. And if there is a thought that you don't want, or a person that you don't want at a certain time, you have to know how to not open the door. You have to know how to close your mind to these things. And if you're not a master of your own domain, then you're right. You can't control your thoughts. You can't focus. You can't deal and do what you were intended to do in the world. So that's a very important lesson. Who was the master of controlling himself? That was Joseph. And Joseph is known as Joseph the Tzaddik, the righteous one. Why is he known as the righteous one? Because of his encounter with Potiphar's wife, who tried to seduce him for many, many, many days, until eventually she had him all alone and cornered, and she thought she would get the better of him. But Joseph was willing to do anything not to sin in this respect, not to create a blemish on his covenant. And it says that when he resisted her on that day, there's also this cantillation mark, Shalshelet, Vayema'en. And he went through terrible suffering, not to give in. And the connection here is obvious, that Vayishchat, when Moses slaughters this last animal, it's to make them consummately whole, which means to give them the resistance necessary and the stamina needed in order to resist whatever kind of foreign influence might enter into their minds. Because you remember that priests, even if they have a thought that is improper, meaning they think during the slaughtering or during the placing of the parts on the altar, they think during that time that this animal will be eaten more than the time that it's allotted. Most of the animals are allotted for 2 days and a night in between. And they think, okay, this animal will also be eaten during a second night. That makes the sacrifice unacceptable. It voids it, it invalidates it. And so the priests, to be whole is not just to control themselves in terms of their actions, it's also to control themselves in terms of their thoughts, in terms of what they let in and what they don't let in. And this was the intent that Moses had when he slaughtered, with the intent that this slaughtering will give them, the slaughtering of this peace offering, this wholeness offering, will give the priests, Aaron and his sons, will give them this consummate wholeness to be able to contain themselves, to be able to control themselves, to be able to serve properly in their function in the tabernacle. Thanks for joining today, and I hope to see you next week on Sunday. All the best. Shabbat Shalom.
Where are we gonna?